Though I have the unenviable task of following all those great speakers. So, as you said, I'm the founder and CEO of Fig, here today to talk about the cure for Sequelitis. So to start, let's just look at the market. So I'm going to pick on Square Enix. So I had the good fortune to come by an NES Classic and played Final Fantasy I. Never had done that before, and I really enjoyed the experience. And I've actually bought and have not played yet Final Fantasy 15. But you'll notice with a lot of these publishers, there's a trend that's happening, and that is that when they release titles, they release numbers after the titles. So Activision, you've got Call of Duty. Of course, you've also got Modern Warfare. Ubisoft had one of the freshest IPs on this list, of course, with Assassin's Creed. That has had now plenty of installments. Just looking at EA, and I think there's one stat that really will illustrates what's happening in the market, and that's in 2008, EA released or published 60 games. Last year, they published 8. So what was happening, of course, is what used to happen is you would have tent poles, and those tent poles, the proceeds from it would actually fund more creative risk-taking with other new IP, and that new IP, of course, would be the successor. So looking at the mobile space, the trend actually continues. So they are not immune. And some would say, even though you don't have the numerals after all the titles, you actually see a lot of the same content, and there is not much variety. So what's happening here? As far as what are the symptoms here? So one of the symptoms is, of course, production costs have just gone way up. And because of that, content risk is huge. It's really hard to take that risk anymore and have a P&L which will bring in proceeds. So, and then the very process itself, you have how do you select these titles? They get selected through greenlight committees, generally done behind closed doors. Publishers generally finance at 100% off their balance sheet. And when you do that, you need to control the process, obviously. And so they have creative control, and the money is doled out in small installments. And so what are potential treatments for this? Before I hit that real quick, let's just go back about 40 years. And so in the game industry, you had Trip Hawkins, and he was putting together a publishing contract, and he was inspired by the music industry, and that contract he put together has actually been the basis of many of the contracts we still have in publishing. Now, to contrast that, in film, something was going on. There's a book which details this. It's called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. Rob Reed, I don't know if he's in the audience tonight. I heard he was here, but he recommended this book a couple years ago. I'm recommending it to you. It's really great. It talks about film financing. What was happening in Hollywood is all the major studios where they had very high budget on-set films, and they were funding them 100% themselves. And so this group of directors actually got together, got very scrappy, and got money from many different sources and pulled it together. And because no one person was funding the whole thing, they had creative control. From that time, many of the blockbusters who've dominated the market have come from that time. And so here's potential treatments. One is we have the ability now to actually go to the community and get feedback before we actually greenlight a game. And to illustrate this, I think Netflix has done a great job. They're watching viewer behavior, and saw that people were actually consuming West Wing much more than they were watching new content that was being produced. And so they commissioned House of Cards. And then as far as funding, I talked to, this goes out to developers and also publishers, which is just be open to new sources of funding and not having to fund the thing completely yourself. And with that, giving up some of the creative control. And so I'll leave you with one book, and that's another great book, Creativity Inc. So spoilers here, sorry for this, but so Pixar has had the last 10 films they've released, they've all been top 10 grossing, and they've all been new IP. And what they distill that down to is that they are empowering the creators and equipping them with all the resources they need and all the leeway they need to make the best product they can. In this case, best movies. Thanks.